Hello, Girthy Guitarist here. Wanted to do a product review of this Arcade1up Atari STAR Wars arcade machine I just purchased. This has been out about a year or so. This is a sort of half-size version of the original Star Wars arcade machine that came out in 1983. It also has Empire Strikes Back, which you can see here, and it also comes with Return of the Jedi, which is a bit of a different game. The original Star Wars game was a vector graphics game, so one of the first games to actually have sort of 3D effects. I remember the first time I saw this was actually at Disneyland, probably around 1985, so I was a little over 6 years old. Star Tours wasn't there yet, but I remember the arcade was really close to Space Mountain, and when you had to wait in that long line, you could see the arcade, and it was actually kind of right out front. But I never actually got to play it, probably until 1987 or 88, a little bit later. I never really saw it at another arcade, so I had to wait until I came back to Disneyland. And then later in my college years in the late 90s, there was this huge arcade next to the college I went to up in Los Angeles, and they had an Empire Strikes Back machine, which was the kind that you sit in with a cockpit, and I must have played that a couple times a week for at least the 2 years that I went there. So it was a lot of fun, just trying to rack up that high score, and there were a lot of games at the time, new Star Wars arcade and all these 3D games and stuff, but I really felt that there was a lot of magic with those original games because they just look so cool with those those bright vector graphics screens. This machine also comes with Return of the Jedi, which is a different game than the previous two. The original arcade machine, the first time I played it was at a retro arcade called Retro Volt, and that's out in Calimesa, California, and they're closed now due to the coronavirus, but they had a really good selection of games, and they had one of these Return of the Jedi machines, and it was the yoke is pretty similar on that as to what was on the Empire and Star Wars arcade machines. And you can see here, it's got a little bit more diverse gameplay, even though it looks like your standard 16-bit, 80s game. It's pretty fun once I've gotten used to it. It's a little difficult when you're switching back and forth on angles, but ultimately the granddaddy of them is the original game. It's probably the hardest with trying to shoot down the towers and the amount of fireballs that come at you. And then ultimately the trench run, as you continue to go through, it gets harder and harder, and it's practically impossible once you get to a particular difficulty setting. But it's still a lot of fun for repeat playing. The quality of the machine is pretty good for the money. I picked this up for about $470, which is a little more than it retailed for, but since they're out of stock with the partners at Arcade1, which is Walmart and GameStop and I think even Costco or Sam's Club, they were all out of them. They do have the one that comes with the bench, but I didn't have the space for that given my room is so small, and I have other things like guitars and electronics, and I use it as an office. But it works really well. It's fun. My kids love it. The controls are fantastic. The yoke feels exactly like the arcade machine. So if you're in the market for something like this, I think it's a good value even at $500 or more. I picked up the stool for an extra $80, but you can, for $500, get one with the bench built in. So again, if you're interested, this is a great buy. If you're a fan of Star Wars, it's a must-have. By the way, I think I found out where JJ got that idea for the Death Star chunks in Rise of Skywalker.
Wait for me.